Every episode this season was its own microcosm of learning. This recap connects those moments. If you missed an episode, this is your map back to it. It is for anyone working out who they are and learning that who they are is enough. Hello, friends, and welcome to I Know I Belong When, an Innovation Unbiased production where bold voices, curious stories, and authentic impact amplify knowing that you are invited, seen, heard, and needed. Our conversations go from the boardrooms to the break rooms, from the sidewalks to our living rooms, from our relationships to ourselves. We explore the full spectrum of belonging, the joy of being seen, the pain of being left out, and the courage it takes to build spaces where every identity is welcomed, valued, and loved. We also hold space for each of our unique identities to joyfully prosper and thrive. I am your host, Christopher Bylone, someone who believes knowing you belong is a birthright. Here's what a season of these conversations reminds me. Belonging does not happen by accident. Somebody builds it on purpose, usually in a moment so small you could almost miss it. A teacher who says, "We have not heard from you yet." A leader who hands the room over and walks towards the dinner instead of the disaster. A father who looks in his son's eye and says, "From now on, I see you as my colleague." The guests this season have been building cultures of belonging their entire lives. Some of them you met this season for the first time. Some of them shaped how I do this work long before I picked up a microphone. Every one of them gave us a moment worth keeping. I want to let you in on the quiet math underneath it all. We say belonging is what happens when inclusion meets diversity and equity, when access lifts the whole thing up, and when justice keeps it honest. You do not need a formula on a whiteboard to know it. You know it the second someone treats your difference as something the room needed all along. So here is where we're headed. We're going to walk through 6 ways of showing up, catching our own bias and choosing fairness anyway, seeing the whole person, never just one slice of them, including people in small daily things, staying nimble and human across differences, building so everyone can partake, and finding the courage to stand up when standing up cost you something. 12 voices, 6 behaviors, 1 question we keep asking. What does it actually look like to build a place where people know they belong? Let me reintroduce you. We start with 2 people who remind us what it means to show up as a whole person, a present human, before anything else. It's the foundation, showing up as a full present human. Before any behavior, before any framework, there is a person, whole, layered, and worth meeting in full. When we let ourselves be who we are and let others do the same, we lay the foundation that everything else is built on. Jake Ross, founder and CEO of Belong Together, studies belonging for a living, and he opened our conversation by refusing to be reduced to any single version of himself.
We are all of the things. We are who we are in our deepest authenticity. We are who we are for others. We are who we are in front of a room. We are who we are behind closed doors. And I always appreciate when the who we are encompasses all of that.
Notice what Jake did there. He refused to hand anyone a single slice of himself and call it whole. That refusal is the starting line. When we let people be plural, all of their identities at once, we stop asking them to leave parts of themselves at the door. The practice is simple and hard. Assume someone in front of you is more than the one thing you can see. Catherine Dudashank, former bank CEO and creator of the Sincerely framework, ran one of the largest banks in North America. When I asked her which of her many identities felt most like home, she did not reach for a title.
I'm a human being. And yes, I'm a parent and a mother and a former bank CEO. I've lived in a man's world and I live in a woman's world. So I've got the gift of many perspectives. But first and foremost, I'm a human being. I'm a human being.
A bank CEO set down the corner office and led with her humanity. That is the whole foundation in one sentence. When we meet each other as people first, the resume stops being the price of admission. Hold on to that as we explore the 6 behaviors, because every one of them is just a way of honoring the human you've already decided to see. Being purposely unbiased recognizes your own bias, works to shrink its reach, and builds spaces where fairness is the default. This behavior starts with a hard look in the mirror. When we name our patterns before someone else has to, when we recover with grace instead of defensiveness, when we model that bias is something to reach and correct, not something to hide. Howard Ross, author of Everyday Bias and Our Search for Belonging, has spent more than 50 years inside this work. He took us to Jackson, Mississippi in 1988 to a room where a young man asked why a white man was leading the conversation. Howard had spent years answering that question with his credentials. This time, something shifted.
All of a sudden, something changed for me. I realized that trying to prove myself was not the answer, that just being, like that famous quote, be the change you want to see in the world, that by actually being there like I had a right to be there was my ticket to being there.
Here is what Howard revealed. The reflex to defend is often the bias protecting its own comfort. He stopped reaching for his own record and started trusting his presence. That is humanity doing real work. The practice for the rest of us is to catch the moment when we begin building our own defense and ask a better question. What if I listened instead of explaining myself? What if being challenged is the invitation, not the threat? Joe Metricote, retired CHRO and author of Own Thy Stuff, was a dancer and actor before he engineered cultures. He reached back into the studio to explain accountability. He pointed out that a rehearsal room is full of mirrors and ordinary life is not.
We don't know who our authentic selves are without that check. So when someone says to me, stop shouting, what I say is, you know what, I apologize if you're experiencing me as shouting. I want to listen to what you're saying. Let's take the temperature down in the room and let's start again.
Joe gave us the missing mirror. We cannot see our own impact. So feedback is the only way to find the gap between what we meant and what we did. The move he models is graceful accountability. Own the impact without collapsing into shame and reset the room. When someone tells you how you landed, it's not an attack. It is the mirror you did not have. The question worth sitting with is whether you treat that feedback as a gift or as a verdict. Intersectional commitment advances representation across every overlapping dimension of identity because people are never just one thing. This behavior asks us to look past the first thing we notice and see the whole plural person, then build communities that reflect the world on purpose rather than by accident. Manny Faces, journalist, culture strategist, and founder of Hip Hop Can Save America, showed us belonging through the cipher, a circle where hip hop happens. He described what shifts in an instant when somebody steps inside it.
When you're in that circle, authentically connected and valuing the culture and whatever it is that you're there to do together, you belong. There's a special feeling there. And whenever you talk to hip hop practitioners or folks that have come from these cultural spaces, they'll talk about that as if it's sacred.
What Manny revealed is that the cipher does not ask where you came from. It asks what you bring to the circle. That is intersectional community by design, a circle built on contribution rather than category. The practice is to build your own circles the same way. Stop screening people for whether they fit the room you already have. Start asking what the room becomes when they step in. Dr. Dawn D. Bennett Alexander, legal scholar and DEI pioneer, built the first employment law course for colleges of business and helped shape DEI as a discipline. She also quilts by hand, and she draws a direct line between the two.
And I have also learned, and this is a really important one, the importance of pieces that don't seem to fit together that do, and end up creating a huge, big, wonderful, warm, comfortable whole, because very often people think they don't necessarily go together. And we're here to tell them they may look like they don't fit, but they really do.
Dr. Bennett Alexander handed us a quilt as a theory of belonging. The pieces that look like they do not match are exactly the ones that make the whole thing warm. She reframed the old question for us. The question is never whether someone fits. The question is what they add. When we trade culture fit for value add, we stop flattening people into a single dimension and start seeing the full person stitched into the larger picture. What would you change if you looked at the person whom you see not to fit and ask what they make possible? Being actively inclusive celebrates every person's bold, authentic identity through daily action, the language you use, the space you make, the people you fit. This behavior lives in small, repeatable moments, listening as if it matters, getting the name right, signaling that someone is seen before they have to ask. Brooke Sullivan, Director of People and Talent at Banyan Software, builds people functions inside fast-moving startups, where she says it is easy to treat humans like tasks. She describes what she refuses to lose in the rush.
You can get really stuck in not seeing the whole person sometimes because you're just moving from reactionary moment to the next reactionary moment. And it's like, yeah, let's slow down as much as we can. There's a human sitting across from you, whether it's virtual or in person. And sometimes you're the first person that listened to them all day.
Brooke names something quietly radical. Listening is not the warm-up to the work. Listening is the work. When we slow down enough to be the first person who truly heard someone, we hand them a micro-affirmation that costs nothing and changes everything. The practice is to convert what you heard into something visible, to follow through, and to tell people what changed because they spoke. Belonging starts with being heard. Sarah A. Scalia, leadership consultant and certified LGBT business enterprise, measures inclusion as performance, not sentiment. In an age where the machine can spell everyone's name correctly, she drew a sharp line about what it does and what it does not mean.
Accuracy doesn't always equal care. At the end of the day, belonging requires intention.
Sarah caught a trap the moment before we fell in it. A perfectly spelled name is not the same as a person who bothered to learn it. Inclusive language is a daily intention, never an output we can automate. The practice is to put yourself back into the loop. Share your own pronouns, ask for others, recover without drama when you get it wrong. The recovery after the mistake is the part people remember. Are you outsourcing the care, or are you doing it on purpose? Human agility asks us to move fluidly within our shared humanity. Curious, adaptive, and present across every kind of difference. This behavior asks us to examine the lens we see through, to adapt how we show up, and to stay in the relationship when the difference creates tension instead of relating to what is familiar. Jake Ross, co-author of the second edition of Everyday Bias, spent a season inside an AI startup watching how people shape what those systems become.
I think the truth is that people actually don't see the impact of not feeling a sense of belonging, but they're building it subconsciously because who we are paints the glasses, right? What we experience paints the glasses.
Jake handed us a mirror for the mind. The lens we look through is painted by who we are, by our histories, and by our blind spots. That is introspection as a discipline. The agile move is to question whether the thing you call normal is serving everyone in the room or only people like you. When you assume the glasses are clear, you stop checking them. The practice is to keep checking and to seek out the voice most likely to see what your lenses leave out. Catherine Dudashank, conscious leadership advisor, led from command and control for decades until the day she let herself be vulnerable in front of 80,000 colleagues and watched what it unlocked for people around her.
Opening your heart and being vulnerable is a gift. It's not a weakness. Suspend anxiety and fear and pressure and shift to kindness and curiosity and compassion. That is the journey of a human lifetime, to find our way back to our soul and live fully from that place.
Catherine flipped the belief most leaders carry like armor. She learned that vulnerability is not the thing that exposes you. It is a thing that lets other people stop hiding. That is human agility at its most courageous, adapting from armor to openness and staying in the harder, more honest relationship. The practice is to go first. When you show the room it is safe to be real, you change what the room is capable of. What would it cost you to lead with your heart, and what might it unlock? Universal participation makes sure everyone can fully show up and contribute, removing barriers before they are named and designing for every body and every mind. This behavior treats access as a standard, never an accommodation, and asks who cannot fully take part here before the launch, not after. Daniel Hodges, founder of Pieces of Me Foundation, lives with blindness and chronic pain, and he spends his days helping organizations understand access as good design rather than charity. He offered a way to understand barriers from the inside.
I tell people, if you think that the blind person looks lost, it's not about imagining yourself without sight as much as it's imagining what would your world be like if all of the printed signs that you rely on went away. We don't get all of these other things that the sighted world relies on. And this is a design choice that we can fix.
Daniel moved the problem off the person and onto the design. The barrier is not the body. The barrier is a world built with certain signs and not others, and that is a choice we are allowed to change. He also reminded us that we build with the disability community, not for it. The practice is to ask before every launch and every gathering who cannot fully partake here and why. Then fix the design rather than asking the person to adapt to it. Whose participation are you treating as an afterthought? Simona Scarpaglia, former CEO of IKEA Switzerland and United Nations co-chair, led through a season when refugees were arriving in Switzerland in large numbers. She did not wait to be asked. She built their participation into the business.
Those were the years where refugees from Syria came in Europe in big numbers and also in Switzerland, but we ran a program to include these refugees in our stores. And we did also intercultural training to the refugees and to the other colleagues, because you need to, the communication is two ways.
Simona did something most leaders skip. She designed for everyone on both sides of the door, training the newcomers and the existing team, because access is a two-way street. That is structural access, built into how the business runs, rather than bolted on as a gesture. The practice is to advocate for participation before the need becomes loud, and remember that inclusion is rarely one-directional. When you open a door, you prepare both the people coming in and the people already inside. Where could you build access in before anyone has to ask? Our civic courage reminds us to lead in community, hold systems accountable, and take public stands even when it costs you something. This behavior does not require a title. It requires an honest reckoning with the influence you already have and the willingness to use it when silence could be easier. Mike Davis, Global Diversity and Inclusion Executive, has spent nearly 30 years in the hardest conversations organizations try to avoid. I asked him what he says to leaders who support this work in private and go quiet in public. He did not soften it.
My message is really that hesitation isn't being neutral. Hesitation is taking the side of the current power structure and the current way things are. Silence is not neutrality. Silence really is supporting the structure that currently exists.
Mike took away the comfortable middle. There is no neutral. When a moment calls for a voice and we stay quiet, silence does not abstain. It sides with whatever is already holding power. That is the heart of public voice. The practice is to notice the moments when speaking is low cost and you stay quiet anyway, and to close the gap. People trust leaders to show up when it is easier to disappear. When the room goes quiet, what is your silence actually saying? Chris Jones, co-founder of Spectra Diversity, has been a social justice presence since she has been a teenager, and she has built a company that measures inclusion honestly. And when others pivoted to safer work, she doubled down, and she has a clear eye for who was ever serious.
you can tell whether or not it's just checking boxes or if it's real. Because a lot of the box checkers are gone now. You know, Target was a box checker and they're out. Costco's in, you know.
Chris named the test that this season has been quietly applying. A hard moment reveals who was checking a box and who built it into their values. The ones who treated belonging as a trend left when the trend turned. The ones who treated it as an identity stayed. That is sustained commitment and the difference between a mood and a structure. The practice is to keep showing up when the attention moves on, and to challenge the systems that keep the same people in and the same people out. When the pressure rises, do your values hold or do they evaporate? So that is the season. 12 people, 6 behaviors, 1 truth stitched through all of it. Belonging is not handed to anyone. It is built in small, deliberate moments by people who decide the room would be different because they were in it. Let me give them back to you by name with one thing each of them gave us. Jake Ross showed us how to be all of who we are at once. Catherine Dudashank led with her humanity before her title. Howard Ross traded his defensiveness for his presence. Manny Faces built a circle that asks what you bring, not where you come from. Dr. Dawn D. Bennett Alexander taught us that the pieces that seem not to fit are what make the whole thing warm. Brooke Sullivan reminded us that listening is the work. Sarah A. Scalia drew a line between accuracy and care. Daniel Hodges moved the barrier off the person and onto the design. Simona Scarpergilia built access on both sides of the door. Mike Davis took away the comfort of neutral. And Chris Jones showed us who stays when the trend turns. Here is what I'm asking you to carry out of this conversation into your next meeting, your next hallway, your next hard moment. Catch yourself building a defense and listen instead. The challenge is the invitation. Before your next gathering, ask out loud who can fully partake here and fix the design rather than the person. Be the first person who truly listens to someone this week, then tell them what changed because they spoke. Notice the moment this week when speaking up is low cost and silence is easy, and choose the voice. Trade culture fit for value add in the very next decision you make about a person. And as we step into a new season, I want to leave you with the simplest instruction any of our guests gave us. It comes from Joe Machicote, and it is the whole practice in one line.
Remember to leave everything and everyone a little bit better than you found it today. Because when you go in with a mindset like that, it changes your behavior, it changes the outcome, and it changes the behavior you receive back.
That is how we carry forward, not as a program we launch, though as a practice we choose. One room, one person at a time. Leave it better than you found it. That is belonging built on purpose. If season 3 gave you the language for something you've always felt, don't stop at the language. Put it to work. Tell us how. Tell us the one behavior you were taking into the next room, the moment you caught your own bias, the door you built so someone else could walk through it. Send it to us, because the work only counts when it leaves the headphones. And then get ready for season 4. The voices are just as honest, the stories are just as human, and the practice continues. One room and one person at a time. This has been a great reminder that belonging is not a destination. It is a practice, and it starts with listening. Friends, if this episode challenged you to move outside your comfort zone, please follow our show and give us that 5-star review you know you want to give, and add a comment about what you will do to champion a culture of belonging. These actions will help to amplify the message to others so they too can find their own moment of belonging. Whether it is navigating the complexities of workplace culture, finding acceptance in a new school, building trust in a local community, or forging identities within our own families, these stories reflect the raw, honest, and unfiltered journeys each of us take every day. And we want to hear from you. Finish the sentence, "I know I belong when," and send us a voice note. Your story could open a future episode. Thank you for listening. Know that your bold, authentic self is welcomed, valued, and loved. And until next time, remember, you belong here.